So a couple things for you this morning right away as we start. I'm standing in the back there, and I'm just grateful for the band that is here. Like, can you guys give them a little bit of thank you guys for being here, right? They're really good musicians, right? They're really good at what they do. And that's a really great thing to experience, but what I appreciate even more than the chops is the fact that they have a heart for God's word in the midst of it. They're thoughtful, they're mindful, and they're here to lead. So thank you guys for being here. The second thing is like the first, right? They got this bandland set up back here with some sweet stuff. And if you haven't been back there, you need to go see what they have back there, because there's nothing better than a ripping band shirt, and they got some, right? So if you haven't been back there and seen it, guys, if you go and you see those, especially those white ones, right? They make you look more muscular and handsome, and they cover over any smells that are there, right? And ladies, they don't do anything for you because you're already amazing. So go back there, buy some stuff if you want, because those babies got to eat, right? They got some beautiful babies back there that need to eat, so go check out their stuff. I want some, but I got to do this first. We'll talk later. Should I even ask you how you slept? Right? Did anybody, I'll tell you what, I'll ask you, did anybody have the flipper in their bunk bed? The guy who's like flipping back and forth all night, and you're just like along for the ride. You're like, what is going on? Right? Or the crunchy mattress person, and you're like, are you eating a bag of Doritos up there? Like, what is going on? Stop flipping, stop crunching the mattress. Or in my house, like with 5 kids, right, I have the whole gamut. I have the kids who I go and wake them up, and I'm like, hey, good morning, it's time to go to school. And they're like, get out. I got one of those. I was like, wow. And then I have the other one who's like, it's a great day. And you're like, yes, it is. Wow. Right? So maybe you have one of those, and you're like, their alarm goes off, and they're like, lights on, everybody's up. Here we go. Ready? Are you ready? It's going to be a great day. And you're like, stop. Go back to eating Cheetos. So whatever you're doing, right? Those are not my favorite Wintertainment memories, right? Being in the cabin and getting not great nights of sleep every time because the flipper's there, right? But I got some other pictures I want to show you from the old days, right? Because I found some interesting ones, right? So this is what it looked like at one of the very first Wintertainments. When you pull in the parking lot, this is the main parking lot. So that building with the behind that sweet-looking truck, that's like the ski shop now, right? You can see kind of in the back right corner, there's like a little bit of a building thing. That's where Neil Lodge is. Like, that's where we are right now, is in those trees. But look at those cars, man. There's some pretty interesting things. All right, go to the next one. Right, more of that tobogganing when they were like on that. I'm looking at this ramp. Somebody built like a ramp in the woods there, and they're like, wee, right? I don't know anything about tobogganing, but I feel like it's like tubing with splinters, right? I don't know if I like that better. Like, at least with the tube, you got like a little bit of cushion. With the toboggan, you're like, oh, chiropractor appointment, right? I don't know what that's all about. Go to the next one. This is what the cafe used to look like. I don't know if some of you guys remember this, right? It was called Main Street Cafe back in those days. And you can see kind of on that far right, there's like a brick fireplace. That's still there. But pretty much everything else is different, right? Some of those things wound up downstairs in the game room. But I remember like all of these people trying to get in a space that's like the size of like where the little corral is, right, for ice cream. Like, everybody's just crammed in there. We were all crammed in Lakeview. Again, sweaty, smelly. It's like got the pepperoni and the body odor combining. Right? You're like, right? So we tore down some of that walls, like you could like scrape it off, right? Just the essence of people. It was, sorry. But my very favorite one, I can't actually verify that this is at Wintertainment, but this was a winter event, was this, right? They used to have an event here called like Teen Time, which is kind of a cool name, right? I mean, I'd be like, ooh, let's go to Teen Time. But one of the things that they would do is everybody who came brought a can of soup. And that was what you guys would have eaten. So on your packing list, it would have been like Bible, pen, notebook, pillow, can of soup, right? And then they just put them in a big pot and had like soup surprise. Like the guy who brought like tomato and the person who brought like creamy mushroom, like you just pouring those in the same can or something? I don't know what's happening, but like we're having soup surprise. So when you get up there for lunch today, maybe be glad you don't have to eat soup surprise, right? Because they're working hard up there to cook something delicious for you. So those are some. I got a couple more. I got some other ones that I'm super excited. But this one really made me laugh because like look at all that. Like we should have had a Campbell's Soup sponsorship for Wintertainment / Teen Time back in the day. The things that we talked about last night. I know I blew a bunch of like information at you, and you're like I know we went back to school, but I did not expect like church history 202, right? So like slow down on that. So I'm just gonna do like a 8-second review, right? Jesus is real, right? Okay? That's my hypothesis for you. Jesus is real and what he says is true. And we're going to dig into the second half of that statement today. We're going to talk a little bit about what he says being true, right? Cuz we looked at all of this evidence that he was real and he had this impact, but then he said a bunch of stuff. And maybe you're asking this question, why does it matter what he said, right? It matters because of what he said. He claimed to be God. If someone claims to be God, they're not just saying like, hey, it would be nice if you acknowledged that I was real. No, they're not saying like, you have your truth, I have my truth, like let's just agree to disagree. They're planting a pretty serious flag that they are the truth, right? The way that we respond to that, right? Like down in the guts, like sometimes like if I say like, no, there is no such thing as my truth, like sometimes that does something to us, right? But that phrase in particular, I hear that a lot. Like I gotta live my truth. And honestly, if we think about that, and if we think about that in terms of the context that I'm sharing with you, that's kind of like one of those oxymorons, jumbo shrimp, or something that's seriously funny, right? My truth, that can't exist if Jesus is real and what he says is true. Because truth, if we understand what truth is, it's not defined by your experience or by my experience. My perspective on what is true doesn't affect whether it's actually true. Okay? Truth is not relative. There is no such flavor as my truth. Jesus talked about this when he said that we are in darkness. I know I referred to that last night, but I want to do a little experiment to show you kind of what I think that Jesus was referring to. So I asked Jono, who's like the wizard up there in his laboratory, to help me with an experiment. I want you to turn off all the lights, everything, as dark as we can possibly get. This is the world that Jesus said that we live in, where we look around and it's really difficult to know what's happening, right? We could kind of reach out and feel, but then we're just feeling things. It's really difficult to see what's going on. And I know that door back there is wide open. But when a light comes, now all of a sudden, we can see things. We can see the sweet bass. We can see the guitar pedal, which has got lots of lights on it. It's very cool, right? But a little bit of light, right? A little bit of light changes the game. Now, we don't have to just feel. We can actually see, right? So if we have a spotlight that we turn on, right? A single light that comes on to show us something that's important. In this case, I guess I get to be important because I'm the one in the spotlight. But the light is what's changed, not my presence here, right? Now you can see the truth of what's happening, and it doesn't depend on you to just feel your way through, right? And how often do we just kind of like emotionally like reaching out and like feeling and like calling stuff based on what we feel that it might be when we're not actually accurate? Right? Have you ever walked around like your house in the dark and you're like feeling like ninja because you know exactly where like the couch is, right? But if you go into somebody else's house, you're like stumbling and kicking stuff. And you're like, what was that? Was that the dog or was that a rug? I have no idea. All right, you can turn them back on, John. The idea here is that when the light comes, you're not relying on feeling. You have sight. And Jesus says that faith in him is like that light that brings sight. He literally brought sight to people in the Bible. He literally took people who were blind and gave them a chance to see. But in a spiritual sense, he gives all of us the opportunity to see. Because he is, as he said last night as we looked at, I am the light of the world. When the lights come on, sometimes don't we like freak out a little bit? You ever been in like a classroom, right? And you watch a movie in your class, and then the teacher like flips all the lights on really fast, and you're like, ugh. That's how some people respond when the light of the world comes in. And others are like, yay, they're like that pop off the pillow person. They're more like, yes, we're back to learning. And you're like, stop, let's watch more movies, right? Nothing better than like watching Home Alone in Spanish class, right? Because that's relevant. It's not even in Spanish, but that's fine. The idea of truth, kind of like in that moment, people recoil sometimes from the idea of truth. Like a bright light being shined in their eyes, they're kind of like, I don't want to deal with the fact that there could be something that's true outside of my feelings. Right? This concept of truth being objective is kind of being eaten away. It's being eroded at by the powers of our culture, by the powers of darkness. They're like, we need to convince these people that there's no such thing as truth. Because if we can do that, then they're all just in the darkness, feeling around. And when you're in the darkness feeling around, you can kind of essentially create your own reality. And if that's not the world that we're living in right now, I determine what's real by living my truth, then I don't know what is. But the idea that there is an objective truth, that comes from our understanding of God. That was given to Adam and Eve back in the garden, the idea that there are things that are true about them. And those have trickled down for you and me, right? They're in our mathematics. They're in our country's governing documents. Like there's this idea that there's something true and real that's outside of your and my experience. So today we're going to look at, with this idea that maybe there is something true, we're going to look at John chapter 14. So if you have a Bible, I want you to open it to John chapter 14. If you don't have one, again, there's a big old pile. It's getting smaller. You can look at John chapter 14. We're going to read verses 1 through 11. This is Jesus talking. He says, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. Would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way where I am going. Thomas, if you don't know who Thomas is, he's one of the disciples. He kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap as like the doubting Thomas, but like dude had like kind of one bad day, right? So, and he got a label forever. So I'm sorry, Thomas, that you had to stick with that, but he asked this question. He says, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him. And we're going to pause right there for just a second. Jesus is claiming here something that is like earth-shakingly important, right? He's not claiming that he knows the truth, that he'd be willing to share the truth with them, that he's gotten onto this path of enlightenment and that he's discovered something. No, he's not claiming that. He's claiming to be the truth. It's one of those I am statements. Maybe you've heard those if you've been around church for a while, that Jesus said a number of times, I am. Last night we looked at one where he said, I am, and meant I am God. And now he's sharing this, that I am the way, the truth, and the life. Right? This is one of those moments where that kind of choice that we talked about last night, like he's either lying, he's a lunatic, or he is who he said he is. Right? You have to do something with this kind of a statement. If he says, I am the truth, you now have to respond to that somehow. You could either say, no, you're not. You could say, like, go get some help. Or you could say, okay, I believe that. In this context, if you put this up against what we think of as truth, right, there is no such thing as my truth, right? The only way that could possibly be an accurate statement is if we belong to him and he to us. But this idea that I can just live however I want and I can do whatever I want because I determine reality just evaporated because he is the truth. He also said, I am the way. You got to do something with that also. He's not saying, I am one of the ways. He's not saying that you can choose to just kind of go in the roundabout of life and be that annoying person who drives around and around and around. He's like, no, I am the way. I am the way to hope. I am the way to joy. I am the way to acceptance. I am the way to understanding. How often do we long for that? For more love and joy? For more authenticity and acceptance? Right? There is a way to that. And his name is Jesus. The reason that we long for those things and that we seek them out in our relationship is because that's the way that we were designed by God. Right? We long for that transparency and vulnerability that we want to have with each other. We want to be known because when we were first created back in the garden, they walked with God and they were known by him and they knew him. The reason that we look for love and affection is because we were designed to receive that from God first. Right? He made us this way. But the problem is that sin broke it. And now, instead of looking to God primarily for that, we often find that we're looking for that in our relationships with other people. Right? That question's been there since the very beginning. Does God really want me to be happy? Why would he give me all of these rules if he doesn't want me to live my best life? Why would he do that? He doesn't really care. Right? That was the sin question that was planted in humanity in the garden. And it's a lie. Right? It was a lie that still exists in our cores today. You know, you go on social media, you doom scroll your way through endless amount of content. You're looking, you're posting, you're asking, like, am I important? Does anyone care? And when you're not asking the question, you're kind of seeking that in others, and you're looking like, what are they doing? How can I be cool like them, right? We look for these things in those relationships because sin has broken our perspective. Like, anybody ever dropped their phone and like shattered the screen? Right? How easy is it to take a selfie when you're like, I can't even see the screen? What does the picture look like? I don't know. Like, you know, put one of those protectors on your phone or something, right? But that's what sin has done. It has shattered our perspective on what is true and right. And so when we look at it, we're like, I don't know. What does it actually look like? Jesus says here in this passage, I am the way. The way to what? The way to fixing that. I'm the way to fixing the broken screen and your selfie camera. I'm the one who brings healing and hope back to the way that you see the world. Jesus says at the very beginning there, let not your hearts be troubled, right? Believe in God, believe also in me. And then he says that he will come again to take us back to a place that he's preparing for us. And then Thomas says, we don't know where you're going. We don't know the way. Jesus says, I am the way. Now, Jesus has been around teaching for a little while. Like, he's done a lot of teaching. He's said some things already. But this, for me, maybe for you brings a ton of hope. Because if Jesus is speaking the truth, if what he says is true, when he says this, it means there is a way. Things can get fixed. Things that we cannot fix on our own. He's giving us hope because he is the way. He is the truth. And he's life. Now I want to turn back just a couple pages, if you can, to John chapter 11. This is a ridiculous story, right? Jesus is going to visit some friends of his. He's made some friends, 2 sisters, Mary and Martha, and their brother Lazarus. But Lazarus just died, right? Jesus is over here, and he gets the news that his friend Lazarus has died. The sisters sent a message and saying, like, please come. Lazarus is sick. Can you help him? But Jesus waits. And in the meantime, Lazarus dies. They bury him. So the sisters are grieving and maybe angry, maybe confused, like, what? We sent a message? Why didn't he come? And then Jesus shows up. And if you look in John 11, right? Let's see which verse is at the top of this page for me. Jesus shows up, and Martha and Mary say to him in verse 21, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Little accusatory in her tone, right? She's not happy. She's grieving her brother who's died, and she's like, why didn't you come? You could have fixed this. You could have stopped this. And Jesus tells her, Lazarus will rise. And she kind of looks at it and says, like, yeah, I know. He's going to rise on the last day. I believe that. And Jesus looks at her, and in her hurt, in her anger, in her confusion, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. And then he asks her, do you believe this? And she says, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. And if you know the rest of the story, she says this. They have this conversation. Then Jesus goes to where Lazarus is buried. He sees the impact that Lazarus' death has had on that group of people, the community, and he cries. His heart is sad at what death has done to his friends and their family. But then, something crazy happens, and he calls out to the dead man, come out. And the people are like, what? What's he doing? He's going to smell weird. Right, that's in there. Like, he's been in the tomb for several days. This isn't a good plan. And Lazarus comes out. Right? And how did the people respond? If you look at verse 45, many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, seen what he did, believed in him. They're faced with this choice. What just happened? Like, there's something about this guy that's different, right? Some of them respond in verse 46. Some of them went to the Pharisees. Yeah, our favorite Pharisees. And they're like tattled, right? I got 5 kids, endless amount of tattling. You won't believe what happened, Dad. She touched me. Right, the dog and it's just constant, right? And they're like, with Pharisees, you got to do something. Because those are the leaders. They were the ones who were supposed to be in charge. Like, something crazy just happened in there, and like the dude who was dead, he came out, and he didn't. Right? So they're responding to this moment, and Jesus had just said, I am the resurrection and the life. And then he went and he proved it, and he raised Lazarus from the dead. If you believe that what Jesus says is true, and he says that he has the power over life and death, like, that's good news for you and me. Because I don't know how often we wrestle with the question of death, right? I don't know how it's affected you. I know that it randomly showed up this summer in the Barbie movie, right? Can you show that video?
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Right? Barbies. Does anybody think about dying?
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Right? And this became this meme this year of like, do you guys ever think about dying? And it was kind of like, record scratch, what? But I know that I've thought about it. I know that the silliness of this plastic Mattel world like touched on something that's real in my heart of like, someday I'm going to die. Right? Death has probably touched all of us. And for Jesus to say that I have the power over that, I'm the resurrection and the life, and for Martha to respond by saying, you are, is amazing. We see in our world all sorts of things that are messed up, all sorts of darkness, all sorts of death. Jesus does not promise that that's all going to go away. But he promises to be with us as we go. That he's asking that our hope not be in the circumstances that we see, right? Because Jesus asked that to Martha, and then he demonstrated it. She believed before he ever showed his power. And that kind of like breaks my mind a little bit. That he is the resurrection and the life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And that brings good news. One last example of something that Jesus said. If you flip back one more page to John chapter 10, Jesus calls himself in John chapter 10 the good shepherd. Now, sheep, I don't know about you, I don't have a lot of experience with sheep, right? I know that they're furry sometimes, and then they get shaved, and then they get turned into amazing socks. Not the whole sheep. Like if you're wearing a whole sheep as a sock, that's weird. But like the wool part, right? I like my wool socks, they're helpful. But he says here that he gives this example of this shepherd and this sheep thing that they would have understood. And we don't totally understand all of the things here, but Jesus kind of gives this description of like a sheep pen, like a big enclosed yard thing. And then he says in verse 7, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Right, so I looked it up. What does this actually look like? I found a picture of what the sheep door looks like, right? So you got like the big stone thing happening, and then there's an opening. And there's not actually anything there. And so Jesus says that he is the door. Right, so he's the one who stands in that space so the sheep can come in and out and nobody else can. The predators, the thieves that he refers to there, they're on the outside. He's standing between them as the door, and he can let in the sheep or he can close them in, right? He says that I am the door in verse 9 again. Anyone who enters by me will be saved and go in and out and find pasture. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. Right? So in this context, right, Jesus is saying, like, I stand in this spot to protect the sheep, and I'm the one who determines what happens to them. And again, not being a shepherd, not having a lot of, like, experience with sheep, that sounds really great. I don't totally understand the context of it, but if I know that there's somebody standing between me and the forces of evil, the things that want to destroy me that are out there, and they can't get past, there's hope, right? So not only is he the way, he's also the door. Now, sometimes there's this thought, like in Christianity, that like if I choose to believe in Jesus, like I sort of walk through this door and now I'm a Christian. And that's not wrong, because Jesus is the door, but he's also the way. So as you choose to follow Jesus, you step through this door into life, and then you walk the way with him. Right? He's there as this moment of letting you in and out, of protecting you once you're in. Now you're behind his protection, but he's also the way. And for me, like that moment of going like, okay, I stepped through, now what? Now I walk with the light and the way. Little by little. Sometimes I feel like I wish I could see a little further. Sometimes I feel like, oh, there's the edge. I'm not sure. But if I trust Jesus, that I can walk in the way with him, that brings me hope and purpose and meaning. So Jesus is the resurrection and the life. He said he was. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is also the door and the good shepherd. The shepherd being good because he protects his sheep, because he lays down his life for his sheep. Jesus did that for you and for me on the cross. He gave himself up. He sacrificed himself in that moment so that we could have life. And then he walks with us in the way. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you believe that he's real and what he says is true, you know that the way is not easy. You know that stepping through the door is only the first step in a journey that sometimes feels like it's easy and sometimes it feels like it's a train wreck. But the Good Shepherd goes with you because he is the way. Now, it's funny how the Jewish people respond to him saying that. They're like, can't you just tell us that you're the Christ? Right? That's in chapter 10, verse 24. Like, how long will you keep us in suspense? Can't you just tell us? Are you the Christ? And he's like, guys, I've been telling you this whole time. Right? I'm telling you in all these different ways that I am who I say I am. And some of them believe, and others respond in verse 31 by picking up the rocks again. Right? Last night, he said, I am, and they wanted to throw rocks at him till he died. They do the same thing here because he says, I and the Father are one. We're the same. You've seen, like, tell us that you're the Christ. Tell us you're God. He's like, I have been saying that, and I am. And they're like, whoa, rock time, right? The people, again, they're not confused. They heard what he said, and they're like, you can't say that. This series of statements by Jesus, these things where he says, I am, and then he says something, these matter. Tonight, I want to take you through a little bit of why it matters to me personally, and a little bit of why I think it ought to matter to you personally. Because if these things are true, if Jesus is the resurrection and the life, if he is the light of the world, if he is the way, the truth, and the life, then you got to deal with that somehow. You have to decide what you're going to do with the door. You're going to decide if you have to walk along the way. And I believe that there is so much freedom and life that comes in that moment. There is joy and there is peace in the midst of the way sometimes being really, really hard. But to know that the shepherd goes with me to protect me, to walk with me, to give me the light that I need, man, that brings so much comfort. So that's where we're going tonight. Guys, I want to pray with you, and then I've got a little bit of an instruction for you for what's next. So would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you that you are the Good Shepherd, that you protect us, that you guard us, that you care for us, that you're the light of the world, that you shine out, sometimes just one step at a time, sometimes so bright that it's overwhelming. But you show us the truth because you are the truth. And God, you provide a way back to God in yourself. You are the way. God, this is such good news. This is freedom. This is life. This is joy. This is meaning. It's my prayer that these students, these leaders, would find that joy and that peace and that meaning that comes from walking with you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.